This is Art History with Kenneth on the KJL podcast channel, a series where timeless masterpieces are brought to life through the lens of artist and host, Kenneth J. Lewis Sr. Each episode takes viewers on a visual and historical journey, uncovering the stories, styles, and significance behind the world's most influential artists and art movements. From bold brushstrokes to revolutionary ideas, this is where the past meets creative perspective. The journey begins now.
Welcome to Art History Show on the KJL podcast channel. This episode is part of the Southern Artist series within the Art History Show, where we highlight remarkable artists from the South whose work reflects the rich culture, history, and everyday life of the region. Today, we explore the story of a self-taught artist who, with no formal training and no permission from the traditional art world, created vivid and unforgettable scenes of life in the rural South. This is Southern Hues, the art of Clementine Hunter, an artist whose work captures the spirit, culture, and everyday moments of Southern life, and whose influence continues to inspire generations of artists. Early life and beginnings. Clementine Hunter was born in late December of 1887 or early January 1887. The records vary. On Hidden Hill Plantation near Creativekl, Louisiana. She was the granddaughter of formerly enslaved people and grew up during the time when opportunities for many in the rural South were limited by the circumstances of the era. She received only a few days of formal education, never learned to read or write, and worked as a field hand from an early age. She later took on domestic labor and cook duties at Melrose Plantation, a place that would become the incubator for her artistic voice. It was here, amid laundry tubs and cooking pots, that Clementine found her first canvas in discarded materials. Old clothes, scraps of wood, leftover paint. She never called herself an artist, but one day, sometime in the 1930s, she picked up the brushes left behind by a visiting artist at Melrose and began to paint. Her first piece was painted on a window shade. She never stopped after that. Her style and subject matter, Clementine Hunter didn't need academic technique. What she had was vision. Her paintings were visual diaries of plantation life, from cotton picking and baptisms to Saturday night dances and Sunday morning funerals. Her figures were flat, floating on fields of color. There's no perspective in the traditional sense, no shadows, no depth, and yet her compositions pull you in because they tell stories, honest, intimate, and often joyful stories. She painted the world she knew, and the result was a kind of visual anthropology. In many of her works, you'll see processions, lines of figures moving from one side of the canvas to the other. In one painting, women carrying baskets of cotton. In another, churchgoers walking long rows towards the river. There's rhythm in these moments and in these movements, a kind of musicality. Hunter once said, "I paint the past. I paint things how I remember them." Melrose and her artistic environment. Melrose Plantation where Hunter lived and worked for much of her life, became a haven for writers, artists, and thinkers in the early 20th century. The plantation's owner, Cammie Henry, encouraged creativity and invited artists to stay and work there. Though Hunter was not formally included in these artistic circles, she quietly observed. She absorbed and she painted, not for galleries, not for critics, but for herself and her community. By the 1940s, her work began to catch the attention of some of those visiting artists, and eventually of patrons and collectors. But fame came slowly. Even as her paintings were being sold, she continued working as a domestic servant well into her old age. She transformed her modest cabin into what she called her African house gallery, displaying her works on the walls and offering them to visitors who stopped by Melrose. Coming up next, how Clementine Hunter broke through the barriers of recognition to become one of the most celebrated folk artists in American history. Stay with us.
You're watching KJL Podcast Channel, home of Art with Kenneth, where he paints live, shares techniques, and talks all things art. The Art History Show, highlighting legendary artists from the past and their lasting impact. The Muse Unveiled Show experience, where real people become timeless works of art. Don't miss the Gallery and Museum Tour Show, taking you through inspiring exhibitions and creative spaces across the country. Join us monthly for coffee, tea, paint and sip, a relaxed, hands-on event at the KJL Art Sanctuary. Commissioned accepted, and now is the perfect time to begin your journey as a collector. Want to support the channel? Tap the Buy Me a Coffee link in the description. Plan your visit to the KJL Art Sanctuary Gallery and Studio at 310 4th Street, Ewing, New Jersey. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to the KJL Podcast Channel, where art dwells, breathes, and inspires. Now back to the show.
Rise to recognition. In the 1950s and 60s, art critics and collectors began to take a serious interest in Hunter's work. She was sometimes compared to Grandma Moses, a nod to her self-taught style, though Hunter's work reflected a distinct cultural and regional identity. In 1955, her art was exhibited at the New Orleans Museum of Art, making her the first woman to have a solo show there. Yet she wasn't allowed to attend her own opening due to the segregation policies of the time. Still, she kept painting, sometimes producing 2 or 3 pieces a day. She claimed to have painted over 5,000 works in her lifetime, from large murals to tiny paintings on snuff boxes. No surface was off limits. Her most famous series, the African House Murals, was completed when she was in her late 70s. The murals line the walls of an old slave quarters building at Melrose, and they represent the largest and most ambitious project of her career. They are stories told in paint, births, weddings, deaths, church services, field work, all flowing together like memory itself. Legacy and cultural impact. Clementine Hunter passed away in 1988 at over 100 years old. By the time of her death, her work had been exhibited across the U.S., including the Smithsonian, and collected by museums, historians, and private collectors. Her influence can be felt not only in folk and outsider art, but also in the broader conversation about whose stories get told in American art. She never painted for the market, never chased fame. She simply painted what she knew, and in doing so, told the story of Southern life in a way no academic historian ever could. Her style, deeply personal and instantly recognizable, continues to inspire a new generation of artists whose work is rooted in memory, family, and place. Even today, efforts continue to preserve and protect her legacy. From combating forgeries of her work to restoring the buildings at Melrose Plantation. Clementine Hunter reminds us that truth doesn't need permission to exist. It just needs a brush, a story, and the courage to paint it.
The artist is Clementine Hunter. I have had the joy of owning these paintings for between 30 and 40 years.
You need to have them looked at by a Clementine Hunter expert. Her earlier work is more valuable. What she was doing in the 40s and the 50s is scarcer.
Yes.
And in general, because of that, is a little more valuable than her later works.
Yes.
If they're genuine Clementine Hunter paintings, I would think that each are worth about $2,000 to $2,500 a piece. So maybe $4,000 to $5,000 for both. And that's in an auction setting.
I see.
In a retail setting, they might be even higher.
Thank you for joining us for this episode of the Southern Artist Series within the Art History Show here on the KJL Podcast channel. And remember, stay visionary, stay open, and always dig deeper.
Thank you for watching Art History with Kenneth on the KJL Podcast channel. If this episode inspired, informed, or intrigued you, be sure to like, share, and subscribe for more. Kenneth J. Lewis Sr. returns every other week with more captivating stories from the art world, exploring the legends, the techniques, and the timeless works that continue to shape our creative world. Until the next brushstroke in history, keep watching, keep wondering, and keep the art alive.